So, welcome back to the SerenityOS developer interviews, finally. We are here today with Ali from Iran, who's going to be the second guest ever. And welcome, Ali. Very, very happy to have you here.
Same, actually. Very happy to be here as well, I think.
We'll see. So, so why don't we start with you just introduce yourself, just do the basics.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ali Mohammadpur, and that's a very bad pronunciation of my name, but it's pretty close. So, yeah, that's me. I guess I can tell you about some other stuff as well. So I'm currently studying for my master's in hardware engineering. And what else can I say here? It's been, I don't know. I'm oh wow.
Well, we've noticed that you're really into programming.
Yeah.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would be correct. So I guess we can talk about that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to hear about how you got into programming.
Sure. So I think my very first, no, I guess it's the same as everyone else from my era. Like, it was just my dad coming home one day with a computer, and he's like, "Oh, hey, let's do some accounting on this," and I just end up playing with it and getting hooked on random things. Although it wasn't really games for me, it was hacking on games, surprisingly. I remember playing Quake one day, and I really sucked at the game. I was really bad. So I was like, I wonder if I could just make myself better without actually playing this game better. It turns out that you absolutely can. It's just a bunch of C code, and you can hack it, mess with its memory stuff. This was, I think, the days of Windows XP, although I had Linux at the time, because reasons.
Sure, yeah. So Quake had a scripting language, right? Is that what you're talking about?
I actually didn't know that at the time. I was messing with its memory layout, like with poking into I don't exactly remember. I think I was poking into devmem, but I'm not really sure. It might have been the case that I think that was the case. Although I remember later that I was messing with its source code as well. So, although that wasn't really my first experience with it, but that's basically how I got into programming, was messing with Quake.
I see. That's awesome. So, what were your first programs that you sort of wrote for yourself that were not messing with somebody else's?
I mean, leaving aside the scripts that I wrote for Batch and DOS, because apparently I didn't know how to boot into like something sensible. So funny story actually. When my dad first came home, when my dad first got a computer, it was a desktop computer, but later he got a laptop, and the laptop only had free DOS on it, and we couldn't really get our hands on any Windows installations for like a week or so, because they didn't sell any that was compatible with that laptop. So I ended up working with DOS and FreeBasic for a while. And I guess that was the first time I wrote something for myself. It was just a script that would basically list the files of your home directory when you boot it. Not really useful, but that was the first ever.
That sounds exactly like my first things, like batch scripts. Just
Yeah, I think it was just basically everyone's experience is the same ish.
Yeah.
But if we're going with a real program, I think it would be I'm not quite sure what the first real program would have been. Probably something in C. After I learned that for messing with Quake, but not really sure.
All right. And this was at the end of the 90s or early 2000s, or when was this?
I guess it was like 2004-ish or something.
Okay. All right. All right.
I would have been 7 at the time.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes I forget that people are much younger than I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, yeah, that would have been a good thing for the basic stats portion. Like, just generally, how old are you? Just for reference.
Well, I'm 24, I guess.
Cool. Cool. That's good to know. All right. Okay. So then let's talk about Serenity. So you've been very active in the project for a long time.
It's been a fun project.
And you make it more fun with your presence. So I would like to ask, what's something that you worked on that you are particularly happy with in Serenity?
Something I'm really happy with? Honestly, I'm not unhappy with anything I've done on the project. I mean, maybe they could be better, like the shell could use some POSIX compliance, for sure. But it's not the case that I'm unhappy about any of it. But I guess something that I'm really proud of, or not proud of, something I'm really happy about, is actually the streaming download support for the protocol.
Oh, yeah.
I realize it's not really... It doesn't seem like a big thing or that interesting, but the other day being a few weeks ago, when I was looking at the fetch spec, they just expect all the abstractions that we already have. And when I looked at it, I was like, wow, I just came up with this on my own, and it was pretty cool to think that, okay, this seems like a good abstraction then. Because many times I've thought maybe this isn't really that good of an abstraction.
No, I think that turned out really good.
Pretty good.
Yeah. And for reference, like the original architecture of downloads was that we would buffer everything, right?
Yeah. The protocol would basically buffer everything, and then I think it would just send you a byte buffer over IPC, which was...
Right.
I'm gonna lie, not the best idea.
Right. We just serialized everything and sent it in over a local socket stream.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it worked, sort of.
Yeah, it worked.
But yeah, that's a very interesting answer. I would never have guessed that would be sort of... Because you've worked on so many things. Like, if we look at like your repertoire of random projects.
I'm not even sure what I've worked on at this moment.
Yeah. Like, the big things that immediately come to mind are, like, the shell, the line editing library, the WebAssembly implementation.
All of those I consider not complete, so I can't really be happy about them.
Okay, well, that's good to know, and very positive, because, like, I don't think anything in the system is remotely complete.
No, but when you, like, when you generalize to something that big like the shell, clearly I can't really be happy about it. There are a lot of pain points in it, and a lot of pain points I understand, that like POSIX compliance is very important, but I don't really like the way POSIX does shells, so I keep just putting it off. Maybe later.
Yeah, sure. I think with stuff like that, you need to find sort of the right incentives to make something interesting for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But something that's interesting about our project is that there's so many people, and if you also just wait a bit, then some weird person from the other side of the world comes along and says, "Ooh, shell POSIX compliance, how interesting! I'll do that.
I like that. Let's do it."
Yeah, I mean, it keeps happening, right? And it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, the streaming download thing, that's I'm glad you're happy with it. I'm happy with that too. So if we look forwards instead, like, what's something that you would like to do with Serenity?
I don't really have future plans with like a system like this. I mean, ideally, I'd like to see it go to somewhere that I can use it, but it's not really a goal for me to switch to it,
Sure.
or anything like that. Although, if it does become viable, I might as well switch to it. It looks pretty cool, and it does work. Eventually, it might work well enough to switch to. I don't really have any plans like that, though. I guess I just like to see it grow. That's all I want to see.
Okay. You just want to see it
The
like
grand
grow and
scheme of
improve.
things. Yeah.
Okay. But in terms of like more like immediate work items for yourself, like do you have something that I would like to expand on this thing here or implement this other thing here, or do you sort of just go day by day?
I mean, it's more of a day-by-day thing, but I do have some, we all have a bunch of items that we would like to do. The I guess the closest thing I want to, like the most, the one I really want to do is figure out how to make the line editor not die when you give it a small terminal. That would be very nice, but that's just another bug.
Yeah, sure, but we have many bugs.
Yeah. So I guess my answer to that would be to I would really like to keep up to date with the WebAssembly spec right now, and they're doing a bunch of stuff. Like nothing new has been added, but there are a bunch of stuff that I would really like to implement, like exceptions.
Oh, sure,
Those aren't
yeah.
really coming up.
So, like, could you tell us a bit more about your WebAssembly implementation? Because you did this basically from scratch, from spec for Serenity, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And I'm sure that a lot of people would find that very interesting to hear about. So could you just tell us sort of what was the inception of the idea, and then how did you do the implementation?
The actual origin of the idea was just, what can I do to get to 1,000 commits? Or more importantly, what can I do to get to 999 commits? Which I didn't, because GitHub made it 1,000. Jerk. But I guess the idea was just like it could be interesting because it seems like a very interesting technology that's very recent and very in development, and being a lot about compilers, it did really catch my eye. So I was like, yeah, sure, let's just go do it. And the how was basically, you start by implementing a parser. How do you implement a parser? Well, you read the spec and do whatever it says. And then it was just a lot of reading the spec, which is actually quite interesting because in the web ecosystem, it's really a lot about just implementing specs, whereas in lots of other areas, it's just up to you. Like if you look at the shell, for instance, POSIX says a lot of things, but it also doesn't say a lot of things. Like it just leaves a lot to you. However you want to do it, just make it do this. But as opposed to that, the web specs are really detailed and really just this exact thing is the behavior I want, and some of us, looking at you guys, really like to take that seriously, and you even leave spec comments and all that.
Yeah, that's true. We do that in libjs, especially lately, and
quite frankly, I see how useful that could be. So
right.
I'm not against it.
Yeah, I mean, it does take a little bit of individuality out of the engine by making it so close to the spec. But at the same time, when you're sort of on your way up and you're an underdog and you don't even have correct behavior yet, you don't necessarily afford being like really individualistic. Yeah. But the time for that will come, I'm sure.
Yeah. Speaking of being correct, the other day I found a really interesting bug in WebAssembly because The spec says basically you can do whatever you want if someone tries to divide by 0. But the problem is, it says whatever you want, but it really means you can return whatever you want. You're not allowed to trap the execution, right? You can't stop. You just have to return garbage values. And we didn't do that, and we still don't do that. But
Well, wait, you're
I'm
not
sure-
allowed to trap?
no. There's another specific instruction that has been added that traps. But the normal divide doesn't do that. And I'm sure spec comments would have caught that early on.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you mentioned this thing about how the web specs are so detailed and so extremely to the point of what behavior is expected that
Yeah.
a subtle issue like that actually stands out as, oh, this is weird. They don't specify this behavior.
Yeah. I think they fixed it in the latest editorial draft. So that it says it may return any value, not may do anything.
Hmm.
So like
Okay.
it doesn't say it's undefined behavior anymore. It just says return any value.
Cool. And like WebAssembly, I guess was specifically interesting to you for whatever reason, but did you ever find any other web technology specs interesting as well, or was this more of a one-time thing for you?
Not really. I mean, I do like the JavaScript stuff, as I've demonstrated in the past. But I guess WebAssembly was really interesting because I guess at the end it's a VM, right? And I really like implementing VMs. As opposed to JavaScript, which is like a very massive virtual machine, and it just gets really tiring for one person to do. As we've noticed that we're not even close to being like completely correct, even in what we have. So
Yeah.
I guess that's one of the problems with the web stuff, is that they're just so massive.
Yeah, it's
You
true.
can't really do it in like one sitting or just one hacking session, basically.
No, it requires a different approach, I think, where you you find peace in working very incrementally, and you learn to portion out the work.
Mm-hmm.
And some people respond to that. Other people prefer to have more free reins and bigger items.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just part of finding what you enjoy as a developer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we talk about other software, not just about Serenity, what would you say is great software in your mind?
That's a very good question, I think. But I would have different answers depending on if this is a graphical thing or just a terminal thing.
Let's hear both answers.
Yeah. So, in a graphical thing, I don't really care that much about functionality because, it would be good to have stuff, but if I have a reason to use the graphical thing, it's just to visualize things better, right? Like, otherwise I'd just use a terminal. Very old thought pattern here, but hear me out. So, at the most important thing for a software that is using graphical stuff is just how it, I guess how uniform it would be in its behavior, right? Like, it shouldn't be surprising to me that, okay, clicking this does that. Like, wow, I'm surprised. That shouldn't happen. And I don't really expect a lot of functionality out of something like that. Like, clearly, let's take a browser, for instance. Even though its the scope of operations is really large, I wouldn't really expect something I would call a browser great if it could do what it was supposed to do and not be in my way and basically be uniform in its user interface, right? So shortcuts should be as expected, and one action shouldn't do something somewhere and something else somewhere else, right? It should just do the same thing. But in terms of something that is a terminal application, I would more expect it to be like, I would call something great if it does the thing it's supposed to do very well. But it could be weird. Like, it could have inconsistent flags for all I care, or I don't really care about that user interface stuff when it comes to terminals. It should just do it right. So I guess in that category, a great software would be something that's performing really well. Not in terms of performance necessarily, but I mean, it would be great to have good performance, but it should just do it right. For instance, when I what to give as an example? Let's say there's an application that just takes an HTML source and spits out text, right? I wouldn't expect it to break because I included this random tag. It should do it right. If it takes 50 years for it to do that, then fine. But it should be right.
Okay.
That's what I call great software.
So if I try to distill this, when it comes to GUI software, you want it to just get the job done and get out of your way and behave as expected.
Yes. Yeah.
And for terminal software, command line software, you have like a much higher expectation of
correctness, basically.
Correctness. So you think that there's sort of room for a bit of sloppiness in graphical programs? Yeah. Interesting. I see. And you expect
that's how I feel, I guess.
Okay. So I guess the browser is the best example of that, because browsers are like a little bit sloppy, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's actually why I thought of it.
Yeah. So do you prefer writing graphical or command line programs yourself?
I mean, in terms of ease of work, like, obviously I prefer command line stuff because they're just easier. I mean, my brain just can't handle GUI stuff that well, to be honest. Ooh, I bumped my camera. So, like, my brain really can't handle GUI stuff that well. It takes a lot of effort to make something that looks good. So, like, most of my development time on graphical stuff is just sketching out the GUI, as opposed to making functional stuff.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of your biggest GUI app in Serenity. I think it has to be the spreadsheet, right?
Yeah. That would have been... I mean, you could... If you looked at its early version, you would just look at it and see, like, wow, this looks like garbage.
Well, that's okay. Like, it's okay to make garbage as long as we improve that garbage, right?
Sure, and that garbage was my, I think, 5th attempt at making a spreadsheet. So it was much, much worse before that.
Yeah. It's funny what you say, this thing about like how you feel that it's easier to write command line programs. Because I used to feel that way too before working on Serenity. But this project just forced me to write so many GUI things that now I feel like it's much easier than command line.
I mean, to be honest, the GUI in Serenity is really nice, especially with the playground. Just I can sketch out the GUI really fast. But even that really fast takes like 2 hours.
What do you find is the thing that makes it take 2 hours? Is it like fidgeting with the margins and stuff, or do you like completely blank out on what to do, or how is it?
It's more like, okay, I make something and then it just looks wrong. I don't know why it looks wrong, but it looks wrong. So I don't really have a reason. I just throw it away, start again, and it still looks wrong. Okay, tweak that bit, and it still looks wrong. That's basically why it takes so long. And at some point, I just get to something that looks kinda okay, so I'm like, alright, let's just go with this, I guess.
Mm.
But at least with command line stuff, there's nothing that can look wrong. I mean, it can be wrong, but we can fix that.
Yeah, I guess it's like almost like a comfort zone command line
Yeah,
programming.
I think so.
Yeah. Um, do you think that if we had like a strong interface guidelines document or something like that, it would make it easier for you to make interfaces because you would be able to sort of reference those and say, oh, well, am I within the margins here? And
I mean, I guess it could bring the pain point of uh, looking at other GUIs to see what they do a little easier. So, like, what's the margin in this and what's the margin in that? Oh, they're different.
right. Yeah. And I'm thinking also about the, this thing that you say that you can't really articulate what's wrong, right? So maybe having a document that tells you like which things would be wrong, and then you can just look at that list and be like, oh, that's what's wrong.
I mean, it could definitely help.
Hmm. Yeah, it's tempting.
But more than often, I end up. I mean, I haven't really compared before and after what's wrong and what's not. But I feel like at the end, it's just like this button and that button were swapped. And it just looks wrong, and you cannot figure out why it's wrong.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and I of course I feel the same way when I see two buttons that should be swapped, and like you don't know.
But at least you can figure out what's wrong with them. I just look at the dialogue, and I'm like, yeah, this is wrong. I don't know why it's wrong, but it's wrong.
Yeah, okay. Well, either way, like I think the spreadsheet has turned into a very interesting little like side project within the project.
Yeah, it's definitely been a very interesting thing, especially with the JavaScript integration. I think that's a first.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any other spreadsheet that uses JavaScript as its sheeting language. Or
And to be quite honest, after using it, I really prefer JavaScript to whatever the language that Excel has, or OpenOffice or whatever. It's really much better. It's a much better language.
oh, certainly, yeah. And although JavaScript is obviously old at this point too, I feel like the spreadsheet de facto language is even older and crustier, right?
Yeah.
But very interesting project regardless. So you do a lot of things that are new to you. I'm sure that was your first spreadsheet and your first
Absolutely.
your first WebAssembly implementation, and you seem to have this almost like habit of just doing stuff that you haven't done before and going all in on it. And that's a very difficult thing. So how do you learn to do these things that you haven't done before?
I mean, if there's a clear goal, I just hack at it until I get there, and many wrong and bad prototypes lead to one thing. So it's not like I just sketch out something and then, oh, hey, it's done. Here's the spreadsheet. But in terms of a lot of things that I've done have just been like things that have had specifications and or something that defines their behavior. Like, for instance, TLS has a very lengthy document defining its specification. So
True.
this is what it does, and you just gotta start somewhere and implement the basics, and then implement what it says it wants, and then fight with like OpenSSL on things that the document doesn't say it wants, but it actually wants.
Yeah, I totally forgot to mention that you also wrote the TLS implementation in the system. You've been doing a lot of stuff.
A lot of random things.
Yeah, and a lot of things that that people seem to find intimidating, people who don't do these things. And I think you have a fearlessness about you that helps you. Do you have any idea where that comes
I'm definitely
from?
not scared of starting something and then throwing it away because it's too hard.
Yeah, that's good. It's good because that's how we get a lot of good stuff. And even if like you don't build the complete thing, right? Like our TLS implementation famously lacks some pretty popular ciphers.
Yeah. it's definitely nowhere near being good enough or complete.
Yeah, but at least it's at the point where the basic framework is there, and if somebody wants to go and add additional ciphers or what is it, like Diffie-Hellman, stuff like that, elliptic curve stuff, then somebody could pick that up.
Yeah, and then there would really be no infrastructure they have to implement other than what they want, which is a great place for something like TLS to be, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go there, do what you want, without messing around with whatever infrastructure that you don't have.
Yeah. And another question, going back to Serenity a little bit, just since a while ago, you've been helping me with code review and merging pull requests and stuff like that. How do you feel about that type of work compared to writing code yourself?
I guess it's a little bit more. I find it a bit difficult, to be completely honest. Like, I can review code no problem, but I can't really be sure about what I'm saying. And it's not like it's my first thing to do. It's just that if I'm reviewing something, I'm personally, what's the word I'm looking for?
Expert.
Sure, I'm personally an expert in. Let's go with that. Then I can be sure that, okay, what I'm saying is probably right. But if I'm going to review some JavaScript code, I mean, there are some obvious things I can catch. Like, okay, this part seems wrong. Maybe it probably is. But then there are a lot of things that I also, I guess at the end I'm just really afraid of false positives that I give in code review, especially in parts of the system that I'm not really familiar with / haven't really messed with before.
Sure.
But other than that, it's not really difficult. It's also very fun to do. To review other people's code, it's pretty fun when the code is nice anyway. I mean, if it hurts to look at, then probably don't want to do that.
Yeah, thankfully we have the bot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So it catches really obvious things.
Yeah. That's awesome, though. I really appreciate that you agreed to help me out with the reviewing and the merging and stuff, because we had some scalability issues.
Yeah, the number of pull requests. How many do we even have right now? It's like 70 or something. 71.
Yeah, it's starting to grow again.
We were at a comfortable 50 a few days ago.
Yep. And I think we have more commits this month than any other month in our history. And the month is not even over yet.
Yeah.
So, things are as usual in Serenity. But it's good. So these are basically all the topics I had to talk about. This would be the end of the interview. So do you want to shout out your YouTube channel or TikTok or something like that?
Sorry, I don't have anything like that.
All right.
Go look at my GitHub page, I guess.
Yeah, of course. I'll put a link to your GitHub in the video description. Follow Ali on GitHub for the hot reposts.
For nothing in particular.
Sure. But thank you very much for coming on here and letting me do this to you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.